Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to UNRISD webinar on how authentic is sustainability assessment, discovering how UNRISD SDPI can redefine sustainable development reporting. I'm Il-Chang-Hee, Senior Research Coordinator leading the Alternative Economies for Transformation program at United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, or UNRISD. Today, I am with my colleagues Jan Lee and Gawan Lee working with me for the program. UNRISD is an independent research institute within the UN system doing research on policy-relevant issues to social development. Since its establishment in 1963, UNRISD has been doing research which questions the conventional wisdom and provides alternative thinkings and strategies for social change. The Sustainable Development Performance Indicators, or SDPIs, which we are going to introduce today, are also in line with this research tradition. UNRISD SDPI project started in 2018 with a partnership with Center for Social Value Enhancement Studies, or 사회적 가치 연구원 of Republic of Korea. After 5 years of research and pilot testing, the research project produced 61 indicators as its first batch in 2022. And its online platform was completed early this year. At least 3 factors drove UNRISD to develop these new indicators to measure economic entities' performance for the sustainable development. Firstly, despite the critical importance of measuring the performance of economic entities for sustainable development, we found mainstream ESG indicators could not measure the performance in terms of the contributions of economic entities to achieving sustainability. These mainstream indicators were not that helpful for stakeholders to understand where an economic entity in question stands in the way to sustainability. Secondly, those mainstream ESG indicators usually focused on for-profit enterprises. They were not appropriate for many other economic entities which prioritize social and environmental objectives over profit motives, such as social and solidarity economy entities. And those mainstream ESG indicators were often very complicated, and they were not easy to handle. Many economic entities cannot use them easily because of that complexity. We wanted to have indicators which all types of economic entities, including SMEs, can easily use without heavy reporting burdens. Thirdly, those mainstream ESG indicators often ignored or neglected those dimensions which are key dimensions to sustainable development and transformation of society and economy, such as living wages, care, companies' tax behavior, and companies' political influence. We wanted to have indicators which can help us to focus on key dimensions for sustainable development and transformation. These factors drove UNRISD to develop SDPIs, and now we have 61 indicators as its first batch. Today, we have invited 4 brilliant speakers who will talk about why and how SDPIs are or should be used by sustainable development stakeholders for the sustainable development and transformation of society and economy. Bill Baue, Senior Director of the R3.O, who has been involved in the development of SDPI as a key partner here, and Katharina Herzog, CEO of MoneyCare, an impact investment consulting company which adopted SDPI for their consulting businesses. Heike Grosch, founder and managing director of Matching Fusion, undertaking a campaign for the adoption of the SDPI in Germany and beyond. And last but not least, Michael Peck, co-founder and executive director of One Worker, One Vote campaign and Own the Metrics campaign, who is working for the genuine sustainability assessment. Before we dive into our presentations, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items to ensure that everyone in this webinar has a smooth and enjoyable experience today. Firstly, I'd like to remind you again that today's webinar will be recorded and made available for those who are not able to attend live today. If you have any concerns about being recorded, please feel free to reach out to us privately. Secondly, we encourage active participation throughout the webinar. We will have a short designated time for questions after each presentation. If you have a question during a presentation, please type it into the chat box and we will do our best to address it during the Q&A session after the presentation. After all presentations have concluded, we will have a kind of more extensive Q&A session where you will have the opportunity to ask more in-depth questions. So if your questions is not answered during the short Q&A after each presentation, don't worry, there will be ample time later. Lastly, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute your microphones during the presentations to minimize background noises and distractions. You can unmute yourself during the Q&A sessions to ask your questions. That covers our housekeeping items for today. And before we have presentations of 4 panelists, we will watch 2 short videos introducing SDPIs. Jan?
Hi, everyone. Right. So today, I'd like to just introduce the SDPI online platform, version 1.0, that we at UNRISD have developed. And the idea behind the platform is to bring our SDPI ideas and methodology to life, and to actualize the working of our 61 context-based indicators that can be easily be used for all organizations. And with that, let's play our promo video.
Did you know, even if every company receives very good environmental, social, and governance scores, it does not guarantee they are truly sustainable? We are about to unveil the untold story of sustainability. Authentic sustainability. It's not just a measure of performance. It is discovering if your environmental impact stays within planetary boundaries, ensuring fair resource and energy usage, making sure your employees receive a decent living wage and not just minimum wage, tracking if women's pay is truly equitable to men's and promotions are fair for all. It is SDPI, Sustainable Development Performance Indicators, and its online platform. Your roadmap to genuine sustainability. An easy-to-handle and free access tool to help you assess where you are really standing on a pathway towards sustainability. Embark in your sustainability journey with 61 context-based indicators designed for all kinds and sizes of businesses, no special skills required. You can now focus on making a difference while SDPI handles the reporting burden. All you need to do is to input your data, and the platform will automatically generate a full customized report for you. Elevate your brand, gain trust, and demonstrate commitment to sustainability with tangible results. Join the SDPI community and let's build a world where ESG excellence meets true impact. SDPI, measuring sustainability authentically. Get started today.
So we hope you like this promotional video. We really tried to put the emphasis on the why and the values behind the SDPI. And in addition to that, we are also developing a tutorial video as a guide to demonstrate how to use our platform. And to really have a feel for the platform and to promote the product's features. Of course, this is still a video in development. We are finalizing it, but I think it's good to have a first look on our tutorial video. Take a look.
Welcome to the SDPI online platform by UNRISD. In this video, we will show you how to use the platform and start measuring your progress towards sustainability. To begin, log into sdpi.unrisd.org and create your account. Once you registered, let's start by getting the general details of your organization, whether it's a for-profit enterprise or a social and solidarity economy entity. Include the size or type, the main reporting year, and your currency. Now that you are all set, let's start navigating the SDPI indicators organized in 2 tiers. Tier 1 contains 20 core indicators relating to economic, environmental, social, and governance dimensions. Tier 2 introduces 41 newly developed thresholds and transformative disclosure indicators related to environmental, socioeconomic, and institutional, or governance, dimensions. Once you are familiar with the indicators and have identified which ones are material to your organization, you will need to collect the relevant data and information for each of them. Let's take the indicator water use as an example. First, we will examine the type of information or data needed and show you how SDPI measures your sustainability impact. For the water use indicator, you will need to first input the following information: your facility name, your facility location. You can either search for it in the map provided or enter the GPS coordinates manually. Your reporting year, gross withdrawal, gross volume discharged, consumptive use, net value added. That is your entity contribution to GDP. Number of employees. Now that you have entered all the data, our platform, using satellite images and hydrological models of stream flows, will determine the sustainability of your water use and automatically generate your assessment. Individual assessment for each indicator are also available for you to download easily. For example, here you can find the overview of your data showing the full details of your inputs and assessments. A graph will show how your consumptive use and gross withdrawals stand compared to the sustainability threshold highlighted in red. With our sustainability bar, you can easily assess your current standing. For example, you can observe how this company water usage is sustainable within a 200 kilometers radius, while unsustainable within 50 kilometers and 100 kilometers, signaling dependence on external water sources beyond the 100 kilometers radius. Once you have entered the data for all your relevant indicators, you can download your full report by simply clicking the Download Full Report button. You are now ready to use the platform and become a part of the SDPI community. By joining, you can feature your organizational logo on our page. Get started today. SDPI online platform, measuring sustainability authentically. sdpi.unrisd.org.
And I'm very, very happy to have introduced the platform and hope many of you can find the platform useful for your journey towards sustainability. And with that, I'll pass the floor back to you, Chong.
Thank you so much, Jan. I hope you enjoyed those 2 videos. And without further ado, maybe we can go for our first speaker, Bill Baue, the Senior Director of R3.0. Baue, Mr. Baue, floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Il-Chong. And thanks, everyone, for, let's see, let's get it into slideshow here. There we go. Thanks for this invitation to speak. And I'm going to present on what we're calling the leverage vectors for scaling out the UN SDPIs. And again, I'm Bill Baue, Senior Director with R3.0. As Il-Chong mentioned, we were involved in the development of the UN SDPIs, as you'll see. So I want to start, this is a quote that we often use, and in fact is in one of the SDPI reports. This is from Dana Meadows, who was the lead author of the Limits to Growth report back in 1972 that you'll hear a little bit more about. And this is from a report that we consider a kind of Bible of sustainability indicators that's mentioned down at the bottom here. But in it, she says that sustainability indicators should be related to carrying capacity or to threshold of danger. And then she gives sort of two examples. One is a do not do this example. So that what she says is, tons of nutrient, which is like phosphorus and nitrogen from fertilizer, tons of that released into waterways means nothing to people. It's only when you add the amount released relative to the amount the waterways can absorb without becoming toxic or clogged that it begins to carry a message. So that's what the UN SDPI set out to do, is to carry a message instead of meaning nothing to people. So I mentioned the Limits to Growth, bringing us back to 1972. It really popularized this notion of carrying capacity, which is fundamental to the UN SDPIs. As you can see, a population that grows within its resource base, its carrying capacity, is a population that will sustain itself. A population that grows beyond that carrying capacity will collapse in the dynamic that this Limits to Growth called overshoot and collapse. And as you can see, the projections on the right from Limits to Growth from 1972, more than 50 years ago, show us where we're at today with this collapse imminent. And more recent studies have shown that we are on track for this trajectory. Okay. So speaking of overshoot of your carrying capacity, at the same time that Limits to Growth were being conceiving of this idea of overshooting our carrying capacity, it turns out that based on subsequent research by the Global Footprint Network, that humanity actually was simultaneously transcending our carrying capacity for the very first time. We entered Earth overshoot on December 25th, Christmas Day of 1971, just as Limits to Growth was going to press. And we've been in Earth overshoot ever since then. So we've been operating on what William Catton calls phantom carrying capacity, which is the illusory or extremely precarious capacity of an environment to support a given life form or a given way of life. And so as you can see, we're using more than one Earth worth of resources in a given year, and our trajectory is toward 2 Earths per year. Even if we cut that down, we will still be using more than 1 Earth until we get within our carrying capacity. Now, if we add to this notion of outer limits of the planet's physical integrity, we would also consider the inner limits of satisfying fundamental human needs. So there are both inner and outer limits. This is an idea that was introduced in the United Nations Kekoyuk Declaration from 1974 by Rapporteur Barbara Ward. So let's look at these outer limits, the ecological ceiling thresholds. In 2009, the Stockholm Resilience Center conceived of 9 of these boundaries. And at the time of first conceptualization, their research showed that humanity is crossing 3 of those. Fast forward to 2015, still assessing just 7 of those boundaries, we found that 4 of them have been crossed. And now fast forward to the near present, all of the 9 boundaries have been assessed and 6 of them have been crossed. So we are in the danger zone. We're operating outside of our carrying capacity and overshoot on all of these ecological dimensions. Now, Kate Rayworth in 2012 looked at these ecological ceilings and essentially followed in Barbara Ward's footsteps by visualizing those inner limits of what she called social foundations. And in 2017, for a scientific journal, she published a paper that documented that humanity is undershooting on all 12 social foundation thresholds. So this is really a danger zone, if you will. Now, taking these broader systemic thresholds and applying them at the organizational level is an innovation that happened in 2002 with the sustainability context principle that the Global Reporting Initiative introduced. And the important thing here is the last bullet point, whereby reporting organizations should consider their individual performance in the context of the limits and demands, so in other words, the inner and outer thresholds, placed on economic, environmental, and social resources at a macro level. So this introduced the macro-micro linkage between larger systems and organizations that operate within those systems, and calls for applying thresholds. That's the heart of sustainability reporting. Now, a couple of years after this, Mark McElroy, who was actually involved in the expert advisory group for the SDPIs, introduced what he called the sustainability quotient, and that's something that the SDPIs integrated into their thinking. The sustainability quotient is a foundation of context-based sustainability. And what it says is that S equals A over N, where sustainability equals the actual impacts in the numerator, actual impacts on the carrying capacities of vital capital resources. Think of that as, you know, the actual amount of carbon that you're emitting, or the actual wage that you are paid. Now you have to compare that to the normative impacts, or what those impacts would need to be in order to be sustainable. That's in the denominator. And so in other words, that would be, in the example of carbon, the carbon footprint compared to the overall carbon budget, or an individual's pay, actual pay compared to the living wage norm, if you will. So this is something that the UNSDPIs integrated, and they did it largely because we're experiencing a major sustainability context gap, that thresholds are essentially absent from sustainability assessments. This is a 2017 study by Anders Bjorn and his colleagues that looked at 40,000 corporate sustainability reports that were issued in the first decade and a half of the millennium. And it found that only 5% of the companies, the 12,000 companies that were surveyed, only 5 of them even mentioned the idea of ecological limits, and it didn't even look at social thresholds at all. And then of that 5%, and that 12,000 company universe, only 31 companies, that's 0.258%. So essentially de minimis companies took that reference to ecological limits and integrated it into their performance assessment or their product development. So essentially thresholds are absolutely absent. Finally, the SDG indicators themselves only have a handful of those indicators that actually integrate thresholds. We've pulled a couple of examples here, but of the 231, very few of them integrate thresholds. So even the SDGs themselves are not integrating these sustainability thresholds that define sustainability. So that brings us to 2018 with the launch of the SDPI project by UNRISD, as Il-Chong mentioned at the outset. And UNRISD reached out to us at R3.0 and other colleagues to do some of the background research to set the conceptual framework for the SDPIs. And so in collaboration with UNRISD, we introduced this 3-tiered typology of indicators in this 2019 report that I authored, called "Compared to What?" You know, that harkens back to Dana Meadows' original quote here. So tier 1 would be incrementalist numeration. So that's the numerator of the sustainability quotient, where it just looks at the actual impacts, the absolute indicators, if you will, or intensity indicators, but non-normative ones. So, you know, what's the impact compared to a unit of production? That doesn't tell us anything about sustainability. And so these are incrementalist. In other words, they may be moving us in the right direction, but whether they're going to reach the goal line is unclear. Tier 2 was contextualized denomination. That's where you add the denominator of a threshold or a sustainability norm. Tier 3 was activating transformation. So if we agree that we're not at the place that we need to be and we need to transform, then we need indicators that can show us to what degree we're getting there. And these two were collapsed in the final manual into the second tier. Just briefly looking at the question of transformation, this report by Peter Udding and Kelly O'Neill really looked at the social variables, the 5 that you see on the screen in particular, and looked at what do we need to do to transform those towards a sustainable status. So we at R3.0 led a pilot program with all of the organizations you see on the right. And what we discovered was that all of the indicators could be implemented both by large multinational companies such as Anglo American or Manulife, or smaller for-profit entities such as the GLS Bank or Waleda, as well as by cooperatives such as several Mondragon cooperatives or farmer cooperatives in the US or India, as well as some large organizations that did some of this piloting, including the World Bank, the World Benchmarking Alliance, and the Impact Management Project. So that came out in 2022, and right on its heels, the UNRISD released the SDPI manual and launched the platform in beta. And now we're looking at the platform in its real sort of full release, if you will. And so that was a real moment of celebration. Alan White, a co-founder of the Global Reporting Initiative, called it a Brundtland moment, referring to Gro Brundtland and the establishment of sustainable development as a concept back in 1987. So one of the important things that this did is it introduced this idea, this concept of authentic sustainability performance assessment. And so SDPI defined authentic as in relation to these contextual thresholds of sustainability and transformation. So by inference, what they're saying is any performance assessment that does not do this is not authentic. So the Global Reporting Initiative, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, International Sustainability Standards Board, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and even the science-based targets are all inauthentic because they're either not comprehensively using these thresholds, they may be using them in an ad hoc way or not at all, or they're not actually doing performance assessment. So for example, the SBTI doesn't actually assess performance, it just tells you how to set a target. So all of these would fall into what we would call an inauthentic range. And so we really need to be moving towards authentic sustainability reporting.
Bill, you have 2 minutes to wrap up.
Great. Thanks so much, Il-Chong. So I'll just end with a couple of slides on looking at the SDPIs as first leverage points. Dana Meadows here in the report I mentioned earlier mentions that people can't respond to information that they don't have. But if they do have it, they almost can't, it's almost impossible not to move towards sustainability. So indicators are leverage points. And here are the 12 leverage points that she listed in a report the next year in 1999. The UN SDPIs obviously pertain to number 12, sort of the least effective one, constants, parameters, and numbers. It's also about number 6, information flows, but it's also importantly about the mindset or paradigm out of which the system operates. So currently we're operating in a non-thresholds-based paradigm or mindset, so we need to shift to a thresholds-based mindset. So we talked about not just leverage points that you can see listed here, but also the plank. So we mentioned that we need to move from leverage points to also look at leverage vectors. Where are the different areas that we can create leverage to scale out the UN SDPIs and scale out authentic sustainability? And these are some of the ones that we mentioned on the right. I'll just give a couple of examples before ending this out. So here's an example that was done in close relationship with this project. that looked at 5 different IT companies, and it used the SDPIs to rank them. And what it shows is that all of them fall into the unsustainable category. So this is an example of using ratings, ranking, and benchmarking to scale out the UN SDPIs. Another example would be a parallel data platform that is being developed by an R3.0 advocation partner, Noble Profit. And so they've been working closely with UNRISD to launch an independent and a parallel or satellite data platform to the data platform offered by UNRISD. And then finally, I would mention that we at R3.0 have been offering a training on the UN SDPIs ever since they were launched. And so over 150 different participants have gone through this training that we've done about 10 times at this point, and we run it on an ongoing way. So this is just a few of the ways that we believe that we can scale out the use of the UN SDPIs, which is absolutely necessary if we are going to start moving towards authentic sustainability assessment. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Il-Chong, for questions and answers.
Thank you very much. I wonder whether we have question, especially burning question for Bill. Do we have?
Il-Chong, do you want me to come in?
Yeah.
Right. So since we'll do one questions before we move on, and the rest to be the Q&A, here's one that I picked out that's very interesting. So the question to you, Bill, how should companies, follow this authenticity while local governments or many, national jurisdiction, are already creating policy based on the ISSB, based on the IFRS standards?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we recognize that the ISSB genie is out of the bottle, if you will, and so we recognize that companies are going to need to some degree or other, potentially comply with the ISSB standards and with other standards for that matter. Our approach is that the first step that companies should take is to perform the SDPIs, because that gives you a baseline understanding of your sustainability performance. Now, much of this information will be relevant for the ISSB, and so you're essentially doing work that can cut down on the work that you would need to do for ISSB. But at the same time, you won't be getting you'll be getting a more authentic or accurate picture of your sustainability, which you won't be getting with ISSB. And so essentially they complement each other. But I would say that certainly the SDPIs, if you're looking to assess your sustainability performance, are much more important. ISSB becomes more of a tick box or a compliance necessity that you may have to go through. Leave it at that, Zen.
Thank you very much, Bill. Great presentation and great answer. Maybe our next speaker can give that, give an answer to that question as well. We're going to listen to Katharina Herzog, the CEO of MoneyCare, about how and why the company MoneyCare adopts and use the SDPI instead of ISSB or ESRS. So, Katharina, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Il-Chong. And thank you to the whole UNRISD team for organizing this crucial milestone event of the SDPI platform and inviting me to speak during this webinar. I'm very happy to be here and, as you said, talk about how we use the SDPI at MoneyCare to foster sustainable investing. My name is Katharina Herzog. I'm the co-founder and CEO of MoneyCare, and we are a Vienna-based startup, and it's our mission to break down barriers for truly sustainable investing. Today is about showcasing the use and the value of the SDPI, and therefore I want to tell you the story of why we founded MoneyCare and what role the SDPI play in our work. But let me begin by sharing a personal story. Looking back 6 years ago, I personally wanted to start long-term investing because I came to realize how important private provision is for my future. And when you start investing, you get often told that you have to invest broadly in the global economy in order to minimize risks and also to participate in economic growth. And I honestly struggled with this advice because investing in the world economy, what does that even mean? And do I even want this? Maybe some of you remember this headline from 7 years ago. It referenced a carbon disclosure project study revealing that 100 companies alone are responsible for 71% of global emissions. And even if we look at more recent statistics, we find that stock-listed companies in particular globally account for 40% of climate warming emissions. And emissions are just one aspect of sustainability and how corporations have tremendous impact on the environment and society. And frankly speaking, I didn't want to support this business as usual with my money and a system that exacerbates these inequalities and climate change. And I'm not alone with these concerns. We are currently witnessing a growing trend towards sustainable, ethical, and value-based investing. More and more investors consider non-financial factors when taking investment decisions. In fact, 70% of millennial and Gen Z investors care deeply about environmental and social issues when investing. I didn't really know about the magnitude of this trend at the time, but one day, as I was learning about investing, I stumbled across the concept of impact investing. And this is where it suddenly made click. This is the idea of where the two worlds basically come together. And that's also the idea of how I wanted to invest my money. As the Global Impact Investing Network defines it, impact investments are investments made with the intention to generate positive, measurable social and environmental impact alongside a financial return. And we can have a whole different discussion about how and if this is possible in the listed space. But what I want to share today is that at the time I was wondering, as a simple retail investor, how can I do this? Where can I find the companies that have a positive impact and that are in line with my values? And when my now co-founder and I researched for a platform or app or anything to do this, we couldn't find any. And this is when we knew we had to do something. And the question was, how can we find companies that are sustainable? Which standards, assessments, methods, what is out there? And our starting point, as you heard earlier in Bill's presentation as well, was the idea of planetary boundaries and a social foundation that is part of Kate Raworth's donut economics model. The donut economics model is this visual framework, just to remember, that balances human needs and the planet's limits. And during our research on how to make these boundaries measurable, we came across the SDPI framework, which was just the perfect match. And I still remember hearing for the first time about the SDPI. We were talking to an expert that was at the time working for the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership. And he was very well informed about all the standards out there. And talking about the SDPI, he said, "These are the best I know." So that was at the time when the SDPI were piloted roughly 2 years ago. And to this point in time, we are still convinced that it's the best set of indicators out there. And I want to share with you why we at MoneyCare also value them so much. And I'm sure we will hear this a couple of times today, but we need to repeat important messages. So the SDPI are truly transformative and valuable because firstly, they really measure sustainability instead of risk. Present ESG ratings often evaluate how sustainability affects a company's performance rather than how companies impact sustainability itself. And if you ask me, that's a very critical flaw. And secondly, unlike conventional sustainability frameworks, the SDPI can be used to really assess whether companies are operating within these social and environmental boundaries. And that is thanks to the contextualization that is an integral part of these indicators. And thirdly, the SDPI break with a very conventional best-in-class approach. Best-in-class means that we are rewarding the least bad based on relative comparisons. But sustainability measurement must be based on absolute values and not relative peers. And also from a user perspective, the SDPI are great because they are so much more intuitive, transparent, and understandable. So they just make sense. And our goal at MoneyCare is to provide contextualized and meaningful sustainability data. And the SDPI help us to do this. We look at performance of listed companies in the areas of climate, society, and gender, painting a clearer picture of sustainability impacts and of their business activities in relation to these sustainability thresholds. In each of the areas, we consider 4 criteria to assess them. And then again, each criterion, we identified several SDPI metrics to evaluate them. For instance, in the area of climate, we look at renewable energy, water recycling, waste recycling, and greenhouse gas emissions. And each criterion has this defined threshold. Just like we heard from Bill, with greenhouse gas emissions, it's the carbon budget that it's measured against. The society indicators range from collective bargaining power to CEO-worker pay ratio, tax gap, and measures against harassment and discrimination. And lastly, in the gender area, we cover women's representation on boards, in management, the pay equity, and also support for care work. So in total, we're looking at 43 data points per company to calculate these 12 indicators. And the biggest hurdle in this whole process has been the data collection, because it's a very time-consuming task. It took us, when we first started, around 5 hours per company to go through the reports, through the sustainability reports, annual reports, and collect the data. Now, imagine what time it would take to gather this crucial data for hundreds, let alone thousands of companies. So we had to come up with a smarter way to do this. And finally, we're using artificial intelligence to semi-automatically, so not fully automated, but much, much faster, extract this data from publicly available reports. So to sum it up on what we're doing, it's using these 2 components, namely the intuitive and authentic methodology provided by the SDPI and our AI-powered transparency. These 2 components deliver really unparalleled insights. And I truly believe that we have to provide investors globally with the tools to hold companies accountable through this kind of radical transparency. And to round up my presentation and also become really hands-on, I'd like to showcase 3 practical examples for you, meaning 3 companies that we analyzed, 1 from each category: climate, society, and gender. So let's delve into the climate category and take a close look at one specific example, in this case, OMV. It's an Austrian oil company. And on the slide, you can see their environmental performance assessed from different perspectives. On the left-hand side, you see conventional ESG ratings for this company. And on the right-hand side, you can see the performance assessed applying the SDPI. So if we're looking on the left on the S&P Global rating, OMV's environmental score is sitting at 60, which is well above the industry mean of 35. So this suggests OMV is performing better than average. And this same logic applies to also the other ratings by MSCI and Refinitiv. In all of these, OMV is pioneered as a leader in the climate area. Now, shifting focus to the MoneyCare analysis using the SDPI, we see a more detailed breakdown of OMV's sustainability efforts in these specific areas. OMV, for instance, has harnessed only 2.4% of their electricity from renewable energy sources, falling short of the SDPI sustainability thresholds, which is set at 100%. The company recycles roughly 43% of their water, which is well below the target of 75%. And as for recycling and recovery of waste, we can see that OMV recycles 63% of its waste, which is really not bad, but then again, below the target of 75%. And as for greenhouse gas emissions, OMV's current carbon footprint is 12.6 million tons CO2 equivalent, which definitely exceeds the carbon budget. And including the supply chain emissions, the impact is even more significant at 145 million tons CO2 equivalent. By the way, each indicator is color-coded so that you can easily see in which areas OMV is meeting the threshold or not meeting the threshold. So while traditional ratings indicate that OMV is a sustainability leader, we can, with this analysis, show or provide a more nuanced picture. Now, in the realm of societal impact, let's look at Republic Services, which is a US waste management company. And on the left-hand side, speaking from their sustainability report, this company has earned lots of awards and recognitions, indicating a strong commitment to ethical practices and sustainability. They are, for instance, recognized as one of the world's most ethical companies. And also S&P globally assesses them fairly good in all the kinds of areas, especially in the social area. But if we look at the right-hand side, I mean, you can see the different data for yourself, but I want to highlight the CEO worker pay ratio that we can show for this company. And it's that the CEO, Donald Slager, is being paid 736 times what the average employee is being paid. So to put this into perspective, for the salary of a day of the CEO, an average worker of this company must work for 2 years. Shifting to the last example, which is in the gender area, we can look at UniCredit, which is an Italian bank. And again, on the left-hand side, you see traditional ESG ratings. UniCredit has done a good job collecting all of them on their website, so you can really see all kinds of ratings.
Katharina, you have 2 minutes to wrap up.
Thank you, John. All these ratings indicate that UniCredit seems to be a gender equitable companies, but what I want to tell you is that by looking at these numbers, for instance, 85.56%, you cannot really tell why this company is supposedly gender equitable or why it has this rating. Whereas if you look at the right-hand side, we can see that, yes, they have 42% women on board, so meeting the threshold. They're also meeting the threshold in terms of gender pay gap, which is at 2.6%, so below the 3% target. And they're closely coming to the targets in women in management. So I hope that these 3 examples or case studies can show you how we use the SDPI and how they provide a more authentic and transparent view of sustainability. And at MoneyCare, we really seek to be at the forefront of this paradigm shift that we are seeing and hoping to see in investing. And I encourage each and every one of you to also consider sustainability values in your investment decisions and explore how the SDPI can actually guide you when selecting investments. On the platform, we already have the data for around 200 companies, and there's more data and also on funds to come. So please register for free, stay tuned, and let's all value and apply the SDPI in our work and in our investment decisions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Katharina. And we have several questions for Katharina here and Jen.
Yes, lots of questions, but again, we'll pick one and then we'll move the rest for the Q&A session. There are a lot of questions asking Katharina, how did you get, the thresholds? And maybe you can reference some of the work done by UNRISD and the SDPI projects. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for this question. So it's right that for the thresholds, we were looking at the SDPI manual, and lots of the indicators, as we heard, have thresholds and this context as integral part of the indicators. So whenever they were defined, we took the thresholds. For instance, the 100% energy from renewable energy sources, or the 3% gender pay gap, those are all defined by UNRISD and in the SDPI framework. There were some indicators where the SDPI foresee a time frame contextualization. So for instance, looking at the development of this sustainability outcome over the course of 5 years. And since we are starting with our data collection and we don't have the historical data yet, we wanted to align those indicators with the logic of thresholds as well, and we're researching potential thresholds that are in line with the spirit and the logic of the SDPI. So to sum it up, we really base this evaluation on the SDPI manual and methodology.
Thank you very much, Katharina. We want to hear more about what is happening to SDPI in other countries too. So now we're going to go for our third speaker, Heike Grosch, to listen to her about what is happening to SDPI in Germany and beyond. Heike?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I share my screen and I hope it is visible. Yes, my name is Heike Grosch and I am co-founder of Matching Fusion. We are a consultancy in the realm of sustainability. And in this context, I got in touch with the SDPIs. And I can say, moreover, I would like to share a secret because I have found a new buddy, and this is SDPI. And I can say, I bring the power in, and SDPI brings the framework and the thresholds. And this is what I'm working with when I'm accompanying, mid-sized companies, even startups, to implement the SDPIs. So the contextualization for us is very important because when we see this beautiful planet, we immediately recognize that this is limited what we have here. And we need a framework to work in and walk on when we do our day-to-day actions in companies. And this is why we use SDPI. What we face when we come to companies is a big disconnect. A big disconnect means we have a lot of measures and improvements over several years when we look in the past, but is it enough? Is it enough when we are talking about real sustainable development and a regenerative future? In my opinion, it's not enough. What can help us to bridge that really big gap are the SDPIs, in my view. So we can highlight in a way what is done until now and what is necessary to reach the big targets when we want to live in the donut. We already heard about the donut from Kate Raworth. And for me, the SDPIs are kind of a operationalization of the donut. So this could be really a bridge through this big disconnect. When we look at organizations, we want to support them to really empower them to do it in their own way. And how do we do it? We have a purpose, and we want to integrate these planetary boundaries directly in the sustainability reporting. What's important as well, and really emphasized in the SDPIs, are the allocations. How can we allocate scarce resources? And SDPI has a really good idea how to do it. And again, Donella Meadows, you can create new systems and change systems when you use indicators, because you are focusing on special things. And SDPI helps us to focus on really the big things we should focus. Contextualization is our core feature, I would say. When we work, we do not only look about reporting. This is one piece and an important piece, but it's not everything. We really are on the way to take into account what kind of strategy is in the company, what kind of management system is there to use this SDPI indicators to put them in a management system and to make it as easy as possible for a company to live with these indicators and refresh them every now and then. This is really important to make it feasible, because otherwise there's a much big hurdle to overcome if you have it complicated in a way. So we want to make it as easy as possible. And so we created a management system. What is, I've taken some ideas from the agile world, because I'm a Scrum Master as well. So we use the OKR approach to define goals and to reach them, and to try to see if we have reached our targets and our thresholds when we look at SDPI. And when you put that together and you have a lot of data, you could do new business models. And I would be happy if they are regenerative. As well as the team development and the leadership development should be taken into account when we look at an organization. And what is one thing is missing indeed. It is the structure of an organization. And Kate Rayworth emphasized that in her 7 principles. And I would like to add it here, because the structure of an organization, do you have a cooperative or a company who is listed at the stock exchange? It's really a big difference and should be taken into account when you think about it. So I take the contextualization not only for reporting, it's a much bigger view in this case. So what we did together with Baum e.V., and thanks to Ralph Thurm is in the call, I know. So we brought the SDPI as a training program to Germany. So what we have here is to help companies to make it accessible for them, the SDPI idea, and to get it into all the processes needed when implementing such a framework. So I would appreciate it if you want to talk to me and about sustainability and contextualization. And now I have to admit that I have another hat, and I want to put up the hat of Matching Fusion and take the hat of Baum e.V., because Yvonne Zwick brought me some thing that I want to share with you right now. Yvonne Zwick is the chairwoman of Baum e.V. It is a network of sustainable business in Germany. And she did a lot with SDPI. She is not able to be here today. So she gave me some insights, and I want to share it with you. What has happened in Germany when we look at the SDPIs on a much broader level. Baum e.V. has translated the SDPI manual into German and launched it last November. There is a European-wide initiative called For a Better Tomorrow, and they created a manifesto. And in this manifesto, the SDPIs are explicitly mentioned as a framework to use to make visible what companies are doing to have a positive impact to a green and a just transition. Moreover, we have a campaign on the commitment to the effective Green Deal and call to vote in the European elections. This is what Baum will do in a few days. And there will be a statement to the ESRS. And what is important here is that it could be a good idea to combine these two things. That's what Yvonne told me. And instead having standards who are incongruent or something. Yeah, two things they are under construction is the ecosystem with events and trainings we are just a part of with Matching Fusion, and it's planned to have an European policy dialogue with the German members of the European Parliament. That's from me. That's what I like to share from Yvonne. So for now, I would like to hand it back to you, Il-jong. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much about all those exciting news happening in Germany and beyond at the European level. So do we have any burning question for Heike? Jan?
Yes, sure. So of course, again, one burning question for Heike. So, with the support, one of the questions that was asked was that, is there any examples, right? And we have seen, how Katharina has provided some of those examples where we can apply, SDPIs to companies. And now you mentioned about the support of the EU and really some big movements towards this approach. Have you already seen companies, to illustrate some examples, beginning to integrate like thresholds in their work?
Yes, currently we are accompanying 2 companies to implement the SDPI. And when we when the progress is more on the way, then we will share it in a big audience. But right now it is just in progress. So I cannot share much more right now because the German standards came out in November. So it's really a short time, but we are on the way and to be continued, I would say.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to go for our last but least speaker, Michael, about the future or implication of SDPI for our genuine or authentic sustainability assessment. Michael?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Il-jong. And thank you to Bill, Katharina, and Heike for such great presentations. So first, I need to thank UNRISD, especially Il-jong and Zen, for their inclusive, caring, and inspirational leadership on all fronts, including Own the Metrics campaign, which I'm going to talk about today. Also, I need to recognize my colleague Ivan Zugasti of Mondragon, who's a originator of the campaign, as well as other members of our campaign convening group, including SDPI innovators from Quebec province, such as Marty and Sonia, who are attending this webinar, Republic of Korea cohorts, Shannon from the Predistribution Initiative, Social Economy Europe, and the American Sustainable Business Network's Christina Clamp. Thank you all for making this campaign come to life. Today is a call to action for stakeholders to overcome the limitations of mainstream sustainability reporting standards and indicators. And I hope everyone in this call and people we haven't yet talked to around the world join UNRISD in shaping the future of sustainable development reporting with SDPIs. This is where we reprioritize truth and benchmarking and reporting in the areas of business performance associated with equality, distributive justice, use of economic power and influence, and consumption of natural resources. This is where yesterday's greenwashing and virtue signaling backsliding to achieve SDG 2030 goals become memories in our rearview mirror. So examples of incoming praise for SDPIs, in addition to the observations by today's brilliant webinar panelists, Bill, Katharina, and Heike, Jonathan Morris of Business for Social Responsibility has called the Sustainable Development Performance Indicators, and now it's a major reflection point. Kees Klomp from Thrive Institute says it's sustainability history in the making. Bill mentioned Alan White from Boston's TELUS Institute, who predicts a decade from now, historians will view the release of SDPIs as a Rutland moment, which Bill defined for us, thank you, in the urgent journey toward a just and thriving planet. The SDPI platform is receiving heightened media coverage as diverse coalitions of business partners and local institutions across the globe become increasingly committed to disseminating these metrics through their own local, provincial, national, and regional operating context. As Heike mentioned during the January 30th press conference in Brussels, the Business for a Better Tomorrow B4BT initiative, composed of 15 EU and national business networks, announced SDPI in their manifesto for 2024 European elections. Specifically, the B4BT manifesto suggests SDPIs as one example of 3 accessible tools which should be considered by the EU to increase the visibility of company ESG performance to investors and consumers. The other 2 tools are the Impact Score in France and the B Corp B Impact Assessment. From the award-winning Impact Investing Daily in the US, Impact Alpha, last May, time is running out to meet the ambitious UN Sustainable Development Goals set for 2030. There are real concerns that data related to environmental, social, and governance ESG performance do not allow practitioners, investors, and those formulating accounting metrics to evaluate whether an enterprise is positioned on a viable, sustainable pathway. Current indicators, methodologies, and reporting models still fail to provide an adequate basis for assessing impacts related to socioeconomic governance and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. A new set of indicators developed by UNRISD goes beyond ESG to contextualize data, address common reporting and measurement blind spots, and facilitate the type of transformative change needed to achieve the SDGs. It also includes metrics that address the unique characteristics of enterprises, cooperatives, and others in the social solidarity economy. Since its November 22 public launch, UNRISD SDI's practice community includes now over 743 to date enterprise and financial entities interested in adopting the SDPI framework and methodologies. So our campaign, our Own the Metrics campaign, mission and objectives. We all know that the investing world is facing a 2023-2024 sort of double jeopardy headwinds of inappropriate ESG indicators and anti-ESG attacks. This week's Financial Times headline, U.S. investment funds pull $13.3 billion from BlackRock in anti-ESG campaign. General consensus is that policy and practice need to go beyond current ESG SDG practice. New directions in measurement and reporting of sustainability, found in various approaches such as SDPI, can be organized as a local, global, social, and political force for good to reshape the sustainability reporting landscape. We note a strong correlation between designing best metrics inserted into local storytelling and combining both to ensure profit is purpose allocations of social, human, and natural or climate capital assets across borders, markets, and institutional silos. We see better metrics developing more impactful global practice communities, proving that shared prosperity is no miracle. It can be ESG funded and SDPI measured, social economy replicated, and SDG multiplied through various virtuous cycles and mutualist fair trade constructs. The campaign objectives. First, build collective, cooperative, and mutualist voice and agency for development promotion of alternative beyond ESG methodologies, indicators, and metrics. Second, innovate more authentic human and social capital, climate or natural capital, worker ownership, equity, and democratic governance metrics devoid of virtue signaling or greenwashing. 3, convene the over 6 million global social economy enterprises and their ecosystems as SDI practitioners. 4, earn an equal seat at all global decision-making standards forums on behalf of the rising global social economy community in the name of full democratic inclusion for those doing and proving the work. So let me just quickly go through our origins and impacts and then get to the conclusions. We started at the International Cooperative Alliance World Cooperative Congress in Seoul, late 2021. Ivan Zugasti-Mondragon and I, joined by American Sustainable Business Network and Social Economy Europe cohort, presented a research paper and led an ICA panel discussion. This was the first global call for social solidarity economy, ESG, SDG metrics equality, and it became the precursor to the Own the Metrics campaign. In 2022, UNRISD joined the global convening discussion in early 2022, and then, as Bill has said, launched the SDPI user manual in November of 2022. The Own the Metrics campaign launched the next day with UNRISD, Social Economy Europe, and the American Sustainable Business Network, and the Pre-Distribution Initiative had previously joined in mid-2022. Our 2023 campaign impact in June, the American Sustainable Business Network, Social Economy Europe, Mondragon, the Pre-Distribution Initiative, and One Worker, One Vote held a webinar. Impact Alpha said the American Sustainable Business Council, ASBN, with over 250,000 members, and Social Economy Europe, with more than 2.8 million members, are supporting the SDPIs and the rise of the global social solidarity economy with stakeholders as shareholders. The 3 organizations have launched an Own the Metrics campaign to build collective, cooperative, and mutualist voice and agency for development and promotion of SDPI indicators from the global social economy perspective. This campaign is about those doing, innovating, improving the work, finally owning a proportionally equal seat at the global rulemaking and standard setting tables. In July 2023, at CIRIEC, the International Center of Research and Information on the Public, Social, and Cooperative Economy in Seoul, which was the first global social economy conference hosted by an Asian nation, the campaign team, led by Dr. Christina Clamp, co-editor of Humanity, Work, and Life, presented a technical paper where Yukong Kyoi, team leader of Korea's Legislative Research Institute ESG team, declared, SDPI is worthy and meaningful in that it is closer to the position of double materiality compared to ISSB or the US SEC, etc., and is closer to the context of comprehensive and systemic sustainability pursuit. Although the SDPI platform announced at this time mainly focuses on the social S sector, it also has the characteristics of an indicator that is organically linked to the environmental E and governance G sectors, where the SDPI can possibly provide decent guidance for the private sector, end of quote. In October 2023, we held a 2-day SDPI campaign small business standards outreach session during the biennial Co-op Cincy One Worker, One Vote Union Co-op Symposium with UNRISD participation, where our goal was to impact those standard setting organizations like B Labs and others by resetting small business ESG, SDG metrics and threshold practices and expectations through the SDPI platform to produce better and more inclusive results. This May 23rd, 24th, UNRISD is announcing the UNRISD workshop on the Authentic Sustainability Assessment Initiative to explore ways to improve sustainability measurement and reporting models at the Carl Polanyi Institute at Concordia University in Montreal. This first-of-a-kind consensus-building workshop aims to create a space for discussion on the limitations of existing standards and indicators, the need for evolving these tools to better match the dynamic and complex nature of sustainability challenges, and innovative approaches that can overcome mainstream ESG limitations. The workshop will convene sustainability experts, corporate practitioners, academics, and policymakers to discuss and critique current sustainability reporting horizons and frame useful alternatives. We know in our hearts this will be a breakthrough event. So my conclusions. The world increasingly demands better metrics and algorithms to allocate capital profitably and productively to save itself from itself. Recently in The Guardian, outgoing US climate chief John Kerry warned that the populist backlash against net zero, together with disinformation and demagoguery around the world, is imperiling the fight against climate breakdown and must be countered urgently to avoid facing planetary destruction beyond comprehension and that is not hyperbole. If pandemic economics teaches anything, it is that the world's most exposed precarious populations are the most essential to our common survival. Treating others as we would treat ourselves is just good business, in addition to being morally honest and civically responsible. The UNRISD SDPI manual highlights, quote, workers, ownership of enterprise with democratic control, such as worker cooperatives. Enterprise is jointly owned and controlled by the workers. Workers' control is exercised via a one-person, one-vote system. Workers' control extends to all decisions from operations through governance and finance. Generations Y, Z, and Alpha trends show more interest than ever in building a solidarity ownership economy rooted in shared stakeholder equity and workplace democracy models. These rising generations insist, as Katharina said, on authentic metrics, models, and resiliency mapping, offering stakeholders everywhere a fair choice and a fair deal to lead their lives with dignity and aspiration. New agile measurement and reporting on sustainability models need to meet people where they are and find the most relevant, values-aligned methodologies that allow the highest imagined and attainable work-life balance and aspiration fulfillment through a resilient and recovering planet. Cooperatives in the social and solidarity economy are increasingly perceived as trusted and viable ecosystem vehicles for the achievement of these virtuous metrics and performance cycles in business and work. Own the Metrics campaign convenes and organizes collective, cooperative, and mutualist voice, agency, and expertise to develop and promote sustainability measures, indicators, metrics, and standards. Own the Metrics campaign is about those doing, innovating, improving the work, finally owning a proportionally equal seat at the global rulemaking and standard setting tables, as I've said. Owning our SDPI metrics can help ourselves and others to build a better and fairer macro and micro economics for the many. Already, metrics confirm that companies operating from long-term, purpose-driven stakeholder primacy models are outperforming those who don't. Metrics show broad-based worker-owned social enterprises and ecosystems, including worker cooperatives, aligned by high road principles and practices are more stable, inclusive, equitable, democratic, resilient, and competitive, with fewer job losses, especially during downturns. Merging and sharing stakeholder and shareholder profitability thresholds allows both socioeconomic classes to afford their own mutualist common good values. Last year's, April 18th, UN Social and Solidarity Economy General Assembly resolution, adopted by 28 countries from all continents with no objections, paves the way for a new social solidarity economy approach to ESG's SDGs without greenwashing or virtue signaling for stakeholders or shareholders. This stakeholder and shareholder empower message demands new directions in measurement and sustainable reporting by the people, for the people, of the people, found in various emerging approaches such as the SDI platform. It places truth and authenticity in center rig and center stage. If we convene, combine, and uplift these qualities, methodologies, and platforms strategically, inclusively, and eclectically, the whole exceeds the sum of the parts. If we can intercooperate to monetize solidarity dividends, Heather McGee's term, that can be shared, benchmarked, amplified, replicated, and improved authentically and impactfully to meet the moment. Each time, I know I'm under 10 minutes on this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. So, do we have any burning question for Michael here?
Yes, there are many questions, but I'd rather pick one interesting one. So it could be general question for the SDPI. So CSRD, which is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is now a legal requirement. So how can you convince an organization to, on top of legal requirements, to gather additional data or an additional reporting system for SDPI?
Well, Juan, thank you so much for that question. As you know, in my country, the definition of a legal requirement changes daily, and it depends a lot on how many lawyers people can purchase. So I think anything legal is a completely fluid process. And when critical mass has a better idea, let critical mass prevail.
Okay. So now we're going to have much more kind of extensive Q&A session. So if you have any question, in-depth question, maybe you can put those questions into Q&A window. And while our panelists look through your questions, maybe we can have one more video watching, the promotional video again, because now you have some idea about what SDPI is and what it is looking for and what it is pursuing in terms of the objectives. So maybe that promotional video can be much more kind of resonating and relevant to your activities as a businessman or researcher or activist. So why don't you have that video again?
Did you know, even if every company receives very good environmental, social, and governance scores, it does not guarantee they are truly sustainable? We are about to unveil the untold story of sustainability. Authentic sustainability. It's not just a measure of performance. It is discovering if your environmental impact stays within planetary boundaries, ensuring fair resource and energy usage, making sure your employees receive a decent living wage and not just minimum wage, tracking if women's pay is truly equitable to men's and promotions are fair for all. It is SDPI, Sustainable Development Performance Indicators, and its online platform. Your roadmap to genuine sustainability. An easy-to-handle and free access tool to help you assess where you are really standing on a pathway towards sustainability. Embark in your sustainability journey with 61 context-based indicators designed for all kinds and sizes of businesses, no special skills required. You can now focus on making a difference while SDPI handles the reporting burden. All you need to do is to input your data, and the platform will automatically generate a full customized report for you. Elevate your brand, gain trust, and demonstrate commitment to sustainability with tangible results. Join the SDPI community and let's build a world where ESG excellence meets true impact. SDPI, measuring sustainability authentically. Get started today.
As you can see, you can join SDPI community by accessing to this online platform, sdpi.unrisd.org. Now we have more than 800 subscribers, and the target for this year is more than 1,000. So now we need your participation to join the community. And now we have around 150 participants still. I mean, at the high point we have around we had around 200. Now we still have 150 participants. And please put your questions, and our panelists will do their best to answer your questions. So I wonder whether panelists, I wonder whether you look through questions, and if you're ready, maybe you can answer those questions. Bill, are you ready?
Sure, I can answer a couple of them that came in early. So a couple of questions were around, how are normative impacts calculated by Ishita. Lenka noted that there aren't many thresholds. What is the plan for defining more of them for nature as well as people? And then somebody else questioned the idea of a 40% threshold for women as compared to men. Why isn't that 50%? So I think if I cluster some answers around those, that would be helpful. So I'll start with Lenka's point about there aren't many thresholds. So yes, I think that in terms of areas where a clear sense of the threshold has been established, there are missing indicators, if you will. And so in particular in the pilot project, biodiversity was identified as a indicator that is not in the UN SDPIs that was most desired by the piloting companies. And since the release of the UN SDPIs, There has been movement on that front around biodiversity, which is an example of, one of the 9 planetary boundaries that I mentioned earlier. And so there's both been a prototype for a biodiversity performance index created by Mark McElroy, who I mentioned earlier was on the expert advisory group. And perhaps more implementable is that the Science-Based Targets Network, which is looking at identifying thresholds across other dimensions besides climate, since the Science-Based Targets Initiative covers that. The Science-Based Targets Network is in the process of building out indicators across other ecological dimensions, including biodiversity. So SBTN has released one. But of course, I think that we would need to both delineate the thresholds themselves. And so this gets to Ishita's question. This is being done by both the physical sciences community in terms of the planetary boundaries represents one effort towards that, and the Earth Commission is translating those thresholds into implementable frameworks, working together with the Science-Based Targets Network. So Earth Commission is the scientists that are identifying the thresholds in ecological systems, and Science-Based Targets Network is translating that into implementable methodologies for companies. On the social side of the equation, arguably, one way of answering this is that every company would need to do a context-based materiality assessment where they note what areas, what resources are they impacting, which creates a duty or obligation for them to manage that impact sustainably, whether it's to constrain their impact on ecological resources or to continually regenerate social resources. And so, there could be areas that companies impact that don't have a pre-existing threshold that essentially the company would need to either on its own determine a threshold or in collaboration with scientific or rights holder communities, those who are impacted, to do that kind of calculation. So the point here, I think, to make is that thresholds exist in the real world, but human knowledge is a translation of our best understanding of what those thresholds are for our implementation of them. And this points to, I guess I'll round things out with an answer to the 40% question. So this was something that was very much debated and discussed. We have a couple of expert advisory group members on the call. Margie Mendel and Sonia are in the comment thread I've seen. And essentially, setting 50% is a mathematical impossibility or a high unlikelihood. But in general, they wanted to create a kind of buffer, if you will, so that 40% was drawn from the literature search that Peter Udding and Kelly O'Neill did in that report from 2020 that was part of the SDPI project that I pointed out in one of my slides. So they found evidence of 40% being something that had support, but there's nothing that would prevent a company from applying a 49% or even attempting to do a 50%, knowing that mathematically that might be very difficult to achieve. So the goal was not to necessarily water down equity, but rather to propose a threshold that was achievable and as equitable as possible. By that matter, that you could go beyond 50% of women on boards or pay or what have you, and arguably there's a strong case to be made that should be applied to make up for historical inequity. So I hope that does a good job of at least a first pass answer to those questions.
Thank you very much, Bill. There are some questions for UNRISD as well, and maybe I can pick up some questions to answer. Daniel asked us whether we have kind of strategy to raise the visibility or legitimacy of SDPI above the noises. Yeah, we are making an effort to disseminate this idea about context-based indicators named SDPIs amongst UN agencies. And we have kind of a strategy to make a kind of movement or campaign mobilizing all the kind of allies and stakeholders to raise the visibility and legitimacy of SDPIs. As you know, the kind of standard or regulation is based on consensus amongst policymakers, and policymakers are trying to reflect the kind of movements or atmosphere amongst people. Our strategy is to get an access to policymakers on the one hand, and to get an access or mobilize people at the grassroots level. For the former, we have a kind of a very strong networks or connections with kind of key institutions which influence policymakers. And we are trying to have a connection with policymakers themselves, like European Union, European Commission, dealing with standards and regulations about sustainability assessment. So Michael briefly mentioned about workshop we're going to have in Montreal, and we invited those key institutions like European Commission, European Commission and European Union, those organizations dealing with standards and regulations. And at the grassroots level, of course, I mean, we are trying to identify the kind of allies and supporters of SDPI or SDPI's spirit. So in the future, I'm sure that there will be kind of an adoption of SDPIs by regulators or standard setters. So let's wait and see, how SDPI can change the landscape of these regulations or standards. And that question related to the kind of relationship between existing mainstream frameworks on the one hand, and on the other, SDPI. I think the relationship would be complementary rather than replacement. We need to strengthen the kind of existing indicators or standards by providing context-based indicators or principles and methodologies. At the end of the day, if all those existing indicators adopt our methodology, like a context-based indicators or thresholds or norms, that would be fantastic. So we think it is complementary rather than replacement. And maybe I can give you panelists the floor, to answer those questions relevant to your presentations. Anybody is ready? Katharina?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm happy to take up at least one question. Let's start with one. There was one question that I want to highlight coming from Brad Jacobs. He's asking, are institutional investors taking an interest in your analysis and the SDPI methodology? Because it would be great to know that there are investment funds coming that formally acknowledge and use the SDPIs to show that the SDPIs are not just supportable, but investable. And this is a very interesting question, because it's also one of the motivators and our vision why we started MoneyCare. We want to make the SDPIs and the idea behind it investable, so that people can actually channel their money towards a more climate friendly and social economy. But as for institutional investors, what we get as a feeling or as a response from the market is that they are really focusing on existing data providers, existing standards, and ESG ratings, because I think sustainability in the financial industry is really coming from this risk perspective. And we still have to do quite some work to get authentic sustainability measures in place and in the ratings and in the funds. But what we see is, and other organizations have done this, they've started with rating and putting information out in the open, and then eventually funds and products will follow that adopt these ratings. So I think it's very probable that those products will come. But yeah, speaking from the here and now and the status quo, it's upon all of us to push the SDPI and also demand more authentic assessments. And we see that coming from the private investors side, not because they are all aware of all standards out there, but because of their very own investment experience. It's what we hear very often is, oh, I want to invest my money sustainably. How do I do that? I look at the so-called sustainable funds, and then I see companies in there, without naming some of them, but probably you can imagine like the Nestle's, the McDonald's, the whatevers of this world, they are in these sustainable products, and then people get irritated. So just from a gut feeling, people know that ESG is not sustainability, and bridging this gap is essentially our work that we have to do in the next years.
Thank you very much. And Lenka made a question about the thresholds, more thresholds. And I think this is very important question and relevant to UNRISD research at the moment, because as a developer of SDPI, UNRISD is working on more indicators with thresholds and norms, especially related to nature, such as biodiversity Bill mentioned about. So I think, but important thing is, SDPI is not closed system. It's an open system to invite your opinions, your ideas related to our principles, like a context-based indicators, norms, thresholds for social, governance, nature-related dimensions and issues. So if you have any good idea about norms, thresholds for those dimensions, please contact us and we can discuss to further develop that ideas into indicators. So Heike, do you have any answers for any questions relevant to your presentation?
I would like to build on what Katharina said. In the two cases I'm accompanying, there's one startup, and behind the startup there are a few investors who are very interested in this SDPI framework and want to take it and to understand it and to build on what they have in their portfolio. So it's really interesting to work in this area. There was one question about the way we are dealing with the ESRS in Germany. You need an audit to do to pass what you need, and it is not necessary for SDPI to have it right now, as far as I understand. So the discussion between the auditor and me as a consultant, I'm really looking forward to that, but it's not taken place right now. So this is the current state.
The one episode related to that story is our discussion with the guys in European Union who are in charge of that ESRS. And they said, this is the indicator they have to adopt in ESRS framework. And I think we're gonna have a discussion in Montreal, because we invited one of those guys in charge of that ESRS in European Commission. So maybe if they understand the logic and indicators of SDPI, and if they adopt them into their ESRS framework, maybe auditors should pay attention to SDPI, and maybe they should approach you to talk about your own activities in their own framework for ESRS. And Michael?
Yes, thank you, Ichan. Just two quick observations. One of the questions posed by Soumyajit Mondal, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, talked about how can UNRISD SDPI get much longer term commitments with everyone reaping benefits in the areas like climate and biodiversity, given funds, investors, corporates, and governments practicing short-termism. My answer to that, which I wrote, is I think the reinsurance sector is the canary in this coal mine. If you look at all the vulnerable coastlines around the world, the reinsurance industry is rewriting reality for everybody. And if you look, here in New York, where I live, Superstorm Sandy has a price tag of $65 billion. That's what it took in a decade, $65 billion to rebuild what was destroyed, and a decade to do it. Matter of fact, they're still finishing up projects. So I think these price tags will vary around the world. But these price tags now are being turned into algorithms. They're being turned into formulas, and they're being turned into investment strategies, and they're based on changing externalities. Externalities are everything, and what SDPI really does is it provides the wind beneath the wings of better externalities. We have to push externalities because externalities become policies, and then policies become laws. It's not the other way around. So when my flippant answer right after my presentation, which I feel a little bit embarrassed about that law right now in the United States is a viscous concept. It's actually true. Laws are being changed all the time, but externalities hold for generations. And so we're in the battle of changing externalities, which is why SDPI is such a vital force of nature, literally, figuratively. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We still have some 15 minutes, and audience, if you have any questions, you can type it into chat box still, and we can answer them. And in the meantime, maybe we can have final remark from panelists. Maybe we can start with Bill and Katharina, Heike, and Michael. Bill.
Lost my microphone there. So thank you, Il-Chong. So I think that as a final remark, first I would say thank you to the other panelists. Thank you for all of the great questions coming in from the audience. Great to hear that there are 150 to 200 people interested in this. And that's actually where I would point my comments, is that it's really the 150 or 200 of you and all of the contacts in your networks that are the most important players in this call. We've just given you some of the content around UNSDPI, but you all are the key to scaling out the use of the SDPIs. And we introduced this idea of leverage vectors. You always hear about leverage points, but that's just a single point. You all are all engaged in those entire vectors that can help tip the scales, if you will. And so I would encourage all of you to study the SDPIs, to use the platform, and to really implement the SDPIs, including advocating for the, right now the SDPIs are being obfuscated, and they're not being embraced at the standards levels in the ways that they should. So it's absolutely illogical that none of the primary standard setters are embracing the SDPIs in their totality. Absolutely all of them should be integrating the SDPIs directly into them. So there are some tough questions to be asked to the standard setters and to all others who should be using the SDPIs and related context-based, thresholds-based, transformation-based practices. So I hope that helps to add some last final remarks.
Yeah. Could you introduce one more time about your training sessions for SDPI for audience?
Sure. So just very briefly, we at R3.0 offer them on a monthly basis through June, and then we take a hiatus and come back in October. It's essentially a 1 day. We spread it out over 2 mornings, my time, and we have 4 modules that look at introducing the indicators themselves, focusing primarily on the thresholds-based indicators. We do a deep dive on context-based materiality, or what some of us call triple materiality. We look at these leverage vectors and ask participants to engage with their own specific examples of sustainability reports. And then finally, we do a very deep dive. Ralph Thurm, who has been mentioned, is on this call, does an excruciatingly deep dive on the standard setters and essentially how they're falling short of integrating the SDPI. So we have a training running tomorrow. If you if you really want to join, we've got room. And then we have an in-person and hybrid version in Jersey, the Jersey Islands, in early April. But we continue to have our sort of late in the month cadence going through June. I hope that helps.
Thank you. We got very interesting question from Jechiga. Sorry for my pronunciation. And Jechiga asked, have you been sitting in the same room with EFRAG, ISSB, GRI people? we gonna do in Montreal, and we got the confirmation from EFRAG to attend our workshop, and we are contacting ISSB and GRI people. And the ultimate goal for this invitation is to make a kind of space where we can talk about the future of sustainability assessment. So we are going to. And Katharina?
Yes, happy to share some final remarks. I think if we try to bring it down and wrap it up, what we've listened to in this webinar, it's really this one core message that if we want to measure and grasp sustainability, we need context to the data or the information that we're gathering. Otherwise, this information is not meaningful, so we cannot really work on it or improve anything really. And in the context of investing, it's really about extending the view and changing what really matters in decision making. Are we still only looking at financial returns and risks and anything related to that? Or do we take sustainability seriously and put another layer to it and put those numbers that are considering our environment, our people, at the same bar of these financial returns? And only then we can actually change the way our economy functions and how we live together. So if this is our common goal, then I think each and everyone has a different kind of role to play to actually adopt the SDPI, not just for the sake of adopting the SDPI, but for taking sustainability seriously. And this can be through changed investment decisions or just informing yourself about the sustainability of companies, questioning it, asking why they are not changing their practice, etc., etc. So the more we do, from better reporting, better investing, better managing also in organizations, the closer we get to these sustainability targets. And just to end on a call to action, I really invite everyone to check the sustainability, to care about it, because then we not just have 200 people interested in the topic, but actually sustainability becoming an integral part in whatever we do. Thank you
very much. Patrick asked, can organizations such as CSO, NGO conduct SDG assessment or audit using SDPI framework towards any entity related to SDGs implementations? I think this question exactly hits the spot of UNRISD plan to expand SDPI principle to other dimensions. We are working on kind of research proposal to apply SDPI logic or contents principles to ODA projects. So, basically, it is about threshold norm-based kind of assessment tools to assess the kind of activities to achieve SDGs at the grassroots level or organizational level. So, of course, yeah, SDPI principle should be applied to all the dimensions or all the aspects of sustainable development, and it can be applied to CSO, NGOs activities too. Heike?
Okay, it's hard for me to say anything new because so much is said. I'm deeply happy that so many people are interested in this topic, and I want to encourage you to stay tuned and to go on with this topic. It's really very interesting, and I want to add one more thing. We talked about the donut, and I think this is really a good picture for me to immediately know why it is urgent to do something. So if you want to use it, please do it. Kate Raworth would be happy as well, I'm sure. And if you want to have this ecological ceiling and the social foundation in your everyday doing, in your company, then use the SDPIs and put it really on an action level with that. And then this is the connection between both. And I leave it there and hand it back to you, John. Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
There were two questions which were not answered yet. It is one question about the kind of a relationship between SDPI and ecological economics. And the other question is about, what was it? The relationship or the kind of our strategy to engage with those people who had training about SDPI. The last question about the engagement with those guys who are trained by R3.0 or Baue. I think recently we established a program or scheme called SDPI Community. This is the community targeting at institutions or organizations. But in the future, maybe we can think about kind of community or people, individuals who are interested in SDPI's principle or who are kind of advocating for SDPI. So maybe, we can think about it. And if you have any good idea about how to make the kind of community with those individuals who got trained about SDPI, please contact us. We can discuss further. And relationship with ecological economics, I think we have better person to talk about it. Bill, do you have any answer to that?
Yeah, short answer is absolutely. There, the SDPIs and the philosophy or the practice of context-based sustainability is fully predicated on the research of ecological economics. So the work of Herman Daly, the work of Dana Meadows, et cetera, is fully integrated into context-based sustainability in the SDPIs. I think that's the easiest quick answer to that question.
Gawan, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have.
No. Okay. So our last speaker, Michael, do you have any final remark?
Sure, two things. First of all, thank you again to the UNRISD team, Yichang, John, and Goan for doing this incredible work and for allowing us to be part of your community. And then to Bill, Heike, and Katharina, it's obvious that I have a lot to learn from you, and I hope that you send me the learnings I need so that this campaign that belongs to everybody can flourish. I'd just like to add that when ESG started, and immediately when it got its global backlash, which is very ideologically and politically oriented, people tend to forget that this is the first time in human history since the invention of money that we have more than one kind of capital people are talking about. Now we have 4 types of capital on the table: natural, human, social, and financial. That is a miracle. If someone had said 10 years ago, yeah, we have 4 kinds of capital and we're going to discuss them in sort of equal ways, even though, there's one that's, slightly stronger than the rest, people would have said no way. But here it is. And so we just have to, as we're getting hit with all the pushbacks and all the complexities of trying to stand this up, we just have to remember the miracle that's happened, that we're now talking about 4 types of capital, not just one. And one day they will all be equal, with some more equal than others.
Thank you very much. I think we still have so many questions to be answered and so many kind of issues to be discussed, and so many strategies we have to think about. And all those questions, issues, ideas can be discussed in our platform, SDPI platform. I wonder whether my screen is shared now. This is the SDPI platform, and you can join SDPI platform and you can contact us, or you can leave the comments for further discussions. And all the panelists have talked about the importance of your engagement, your participation, audience, and networks. And I think SDPI is different from other standards or regulations because it is from the bottom, from the researchers, from the discussions amongst players and all those. And we do not have authority to set the kind of standards like EU or ISSB. We are UN, and we can recommend, but we cannot enforce others to implement this. But we have people, people's support. And now we rely on your support to make this SDPI kind of mainstream idea and principle, mainstream enough to be adopted by existing framework, standards, and regulations. With that, I'd like to close this webinar. And I thank you, panelists, for your brilliant presentations and discussions. And I thank you, audience, your participation and active participation with questions and discussions. Thank you very much.